Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Integrity Bites. It's episode 7. Thanks for everyone who's been watching and commenting. This week I want to use the recent Collingwood Football Club scandal as a bit of an example to talk about a similar topic. So for those who know, Eddie Maguire, the host of many TV shows and TV personality, has stepped down as the president of Collingwood after a report found that there was systemic racism in the club over a number of years, but more importantly that there was just a lack of action from the club when they saw signs of those issues. And so that makes me want to talk today around a very important topic that I think faces, that a lot of organisations face regardless of their size, which is what to do when you're aware of issues. And so for this, it's around what's the cost of inaction. In my career, I often get involved in issues as they're breaking, and we provide advice and do investigations and those kind of things. So I'm often at the table listening to executives talk and even sometimes boards around the decisions they need to take at that particular moment. And I can tell you from experience that, the cost of inaction at the time of an issue is really pricey. There's plenty of examples in the last few years of how society and community and shareholders and staff's expectations have changed. And it's no longer really the issue itself that's the big news story. It's now the lack of action. And at one end, you've got inaction, where you just don't want to take any action, all the way through to, covering up and trying to lie or mislead stakeholders and employees. So one of the biggest things I see from executives and boards in those scenarios are the one driver for them is they're really worried, obviously, about the reputation and brand impact to their organisation. And I've seen where it's gone wrong in the past, that it's that lack of having the courage to do the right thing at the time to deal with the issue and own it, which ends up costing the organisation a lot more down the track. And it's kind of ironic because if you think about, if you're running an organisation and you're having some issues and you become aware of them, you've obviously got an obligation to do something about it. But that whole idea of being worried about the press or the media and other people finding out and then driving inaction or cover up is just folly, because as you know, from all the examples you see now, when it comes out 1 year later, 5 years later, whatever, that you knew about the issue and that you at one end of the scale failed to do something about it, or at the worst end that you tried to cover it up, the cost of that inaction or cover up is far greater. You end up with executives leaving, CEOs gone, boards gone, and most importantly, just a big erosion of trust from your employees. And depending on the industry you're in, if you're in sports, you lose sponsors and millions of dollars of support. It affects on-field performance. If you're in corporate, it's hard to recruit people. And a really good example I want to use and is where I think companies have learned from this is, let's look at Commonwealth Bank. Many years ago, they were getting hammered all the time for a range of different issues, and a lot of the time, some of their answers publicly weren't great. But one of the things you probably notice if you pay attention to it is, when there is an issue now, you'll hear Matt Common and others from the bank stand up and say, yep, we've got an issue, we got that wrong, but we're committed to look into it. Now, obviously you don't want to be saying that every second week because people just think that it's lip service, right? But that's been a big shift for the CBA in the last sort of 5 or 10 years around how they deal with issues. And the reality is every business has issues. Every sport organisation has issues. And, it's that lack of action at the time, that lack of courage and wanting to just own the issue, which ultimately is going to cost your organisation a lot more in the long run. I mean, it costs far more to respond to a big crisis issue in terms of response. It's going to end up costing executives their jobs because they were aware of the issue and they didn't take any action, or they actually took deliberate action to cover it up. And ultimately, it's going to cost the board some of their roles, if not all of them, and the chair, because they either were asleep at the wheel and had no idea what was going on in the company, or they've endorsed the management team's actions of doing nothing. So I think there's some good lessons here from the Collingwood saga over the last couple of weeks, for any organisation to take note of. And my advice or tips on what I've seen in my own experience is, one of the key things that you need to make sure is when an issue comes to light is that you take action. And what I notice a lot of the times is that if you're in an organisation that doesn't have the right skills and capabilities around this kind of stuff, you've got the wrong people sometimes making decisions, and those people are conflicted. So let's take a good example. you're in a minor sporting organisation and there's an issue around, some safeguarding issues or member protection issues, and you become aware of it, have you got the right people involved who don't have a conflict of interest and have the right skills and capability to give you the proper advice around how you can navigate your way out of that issue? And often you'll see that the job is given to somebody internally. Now, if that person's got the right skills, great. But often they don't have the right skills to manage a crisis, to conduct an investigation, and to give proper independent advice on how to respond. And time again, I see that where we get called in and I'm like, who's been managing this? And you have a look at it and, it's poor Mike who got given the job to look into it, and he's not even the right kind of person skill set wise. So, a couple of takeaways here are, the cost of inaction is always going to be far more down the line. It's the old saying of sooner or later you got to pay the piper. The next one is when something breaks or there's an issue and you become aware of it, you've got to take action. And then look critically at, have I got the right people who can give me the right advice, who don't have any conflicts and don't have any sort of vested interest in this, who can steer me back to safety. And then, don't ignore it, because ultimately it's going to come to light. Ultimately it's going to hit the press, and it's often going to be the fact that you did nothing or covered it up, which is bigger than the underlying issue itself. So anyway, that's my share for this week, and I'll catch you on the next episode. Thanks.